Thomas Jefferson's presidency. Jefferson starts out with a first goal of reducing the size and cost of the national government. Remember, Hamilton's plan had been to get rid of old debt. He didn't want a bad credit rating for the United States. But Hamilton and Federalists believe that carrying a debt and paying off a debt was okay. Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans disagreed. They thought this was not good. They thought this was unfair to future generations to saddle them with this burden of things we're paying for now. So, Jefferson gets rid of direct taxes like the whiskey tax. Remember, the Democratic Republicans had been very opposed to direct taxes like the whiskey tax. And they replaced that with taxes on shipping, increased customs taxes. This, of course, is going to anger merchants, and merchants were mostly Federalists. So the Democratic Republicans don't have to worry about losing any votes over these new taxes. This is going to work as a method for generating income because the shipping industry is growing, is booming. This is going to work until the British and the French begin harassing our ships in 1805 and shipping really takes a nosedive. We all know that wars are expensive. We all know that the military is one of the government's biggest expenditures. So Jefferson drastically reduces the size of the military. In fact, Jefferson and other Democratic Republicans believe having a standing army is bad for democracy. Too many times in history, a despot, a dictator, an evil ruler had used the military to seize control and take away people's rights. Jefferson believes that a militia is really all that is needed for defense. But if we're going to have a militia, we at least need a few officers who can step up and train those citizen soldiers quickly and prepare them and lead them into a battle. So if we need skilled officers, we need an academy. That's why Jefferson, who reduced the size of the military, creates West Point so that we can have able-bodied officers to lead the militia. He drastically cuts the size of the Army and he almost completely eliminates the Navy. He also wants to get rid of Federalist influence in the government. That starts with repealing the Alien and Sedition Acts, despite the fact that now the Democratic Republicans might be able to use this law to prevent criticism of them. It would look very hypocritical after they had been such vocal opponents with the Kentucky and Virginia resolves opposing these laws. Jefferson does, however, keep moderate Federalists in place in their government jobs. He keeps people who have a lot of experience in their jobs. He keeps talented people in their jobs. He's not firing every Federalist in the building. But most importantly, he wants to get rid of those midnight appointments. He gets Congress, the Democratic-Republican Congress, to repeal the Judiciary Act of 1801. In other words, a lot of those new judge jobs that are created with the Judiciary Act of 1801, a lot of those new judging jobs that are given to Federalist judges, well, those jobs are gone now. But one midnight appointee, John Marbury, sues the new Secretary of State, James Madison, to get his job. Madison had refused to deliver the letter to John Marbury that said that he had been hired by the federal government. So Marbury sues. Marbury wins the case. The Republicans win the case, but that's not what's important. Forget all that. What's important is that in this case, the Supreme Court says that the law that created those jobs was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court says that they have the power to review a law and rule it unconstitutional and render it null and void. This is called judicial review, and it is the strongest power held by the Supreme Court. It isn't in the Constitution. It came out of the Marbury versus Madison decision. Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans in Congress also want to get rid of a few Federalist judges. One of them, John Pickering, was a drunk, and he was crazy, and he was incompetent. So they impeached him, meaning they have a trial. The House votes to have a trial. The Senate holds the trial and find him guilty, and Pickering is removed from office. Another Federalist judge was Samuel Chase. Now, they impeached Chase, but the Senate voted not to remove Chase because Chase was critical of the Republicans, but he had just been being a good Federalist. The Senate said that they are unwilling to remove a judge for political reasons. This is an important precedent, and it's a good thing they did that. Otherwise, every time a new party was in office, they would impeach all the old judges. There are some contradictions to this goal of sweeping away Federalist influence, however. Remember the Louisiana Purchase that Jefferson makes? Well, you really need a loose interpretation of the Constitution to authorize the federal government to acquire new land, because nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the federal government can buy new land. So you really have to take a Federalist approach to the Constitution. You can't use that strict constructionist, only read exactly what the text says, that Democratic Republicans preferred. Also, Democratic Republicans in favor of democracy held at the local and state level, and it's beholden to the people. Well, the government that's established in the Louisiana Territory is nothing like that. Every official in the Louisiana Territory is appointed. They are not elected. This is not the true embodiment of republicanism with a lowercase r. This is not what Jefferson and his party say they stand for. Nonetheless, not many Federalists criticize Jefferson for this purchase because it is such a boon for the United States. It's such a benefit. Next, slavery. Remember, the only Southern concession from the Constitutional Convention, the only thing the Southerners were willing to say about slavery was that in 1808, and not earlier, Congress might consider banning the importation of slaves. 1806, Jefferson tells Congress to get to work on the ban on slave trade. He's one of those Declaration of Independence thinkers who really believes that, you know what, this whole slavery thing is a real contradiction to what we're trying to do here in America. Northerners want a strong bill that makes smuggling in slaves a capital offense. Also, what do we do with those slaves that are confiscated from smugglers? Southerners say that they will not cooperate with the ban because they don't believe slavery is evil. Nonetheless, a compromise bill is signed in 1807 that outlaws the importation of slaves in 1808. It calls for a very light punishment for the smugglers. It also has the slaves turned over to the state they were bound for. So if a ship is headed to South Carolina, is intercepted with slaves that were trying to be smuggled into the United States, those slaves would be turned over to the state of South Carolina, who's probably going to sell them because they don't see slavery as evil. As a result, smuggling continues. Now, to get some perspective, this same year in 1807, Great Britain outlaws slavery, not the importation of new slaves, not the transporting of slaves, but outlaws the practice of slavery. Jefferson's third goal is to keep the United States out of war. He needs to protect the U.S. interest. Access to New Orleans, access to the Mississippi River, these things are threatened by France. And it's not until Napoleon gives up on America, it's not until Napoleon suffers the embarrassing loss to Toussaint-l'Ouverture on the island of what is today the Dominican Republic and Haiti. It's not until that loss that Napoleon gives up on the idea of having land in the Americas. And he gives up on North America. And he sells all of Louisiana for a really cheap price to the United States. In terms of war, a little bit of a contradiction here with the Barbary War. Ever since George Washington, the United States had been paying tribute, had been paying a bribe to the Barbary pirates who are along the north coast of Africa in the Mediterranean. This is an important trading area, and these pirates are taking American ships hostage, American crew as prisoner. By the time Jefferson gets into office, over 15% of the national budget is going to pay off the pirates in this area of the world, not to seize our ships. When Jefferson's elected, they say it's going up. The price is going up. Jefferson says we're not paying anymore, and eventually we win what could be called an underwhelming American victory. And as a result, we no longer pay tribute to the Barbary War or to the Barbary pirates. But it's again a contradiction because Jefferson is willing to go to war to stop this payment.